Your trusted source for news and analysis about Chicago White Sox prospects and player development, covering the Major League Baseball draft and international market, plus the action in Kannapolis, Winston-Salem, Birmingham, and Charlotte. This is the FutureSox Podcast with your hosts, Mike Rankin and James Fox.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the FutureSox Podcast. My name is Mike Rankin. I'll be your host alongside James Fox, senior editor of FutureSox.com. Today's special guest, the one and only Mr. Delicious 13, that is Beef Loaf from the 108.com. It's so good to talk to him again. I don't know how many times we've left him off lists in terms of interviews being spectacular. I think we may have to add him to this one because I anticipate a lot of quality content on this episode. Because here's what we're talking about. Fresh front office, that's exciting. Also some prospects, that's also exciting. That's the entire show. So let's get into it. Beef, thanks so much for being here. We really appreciate your time as always. Before we get into this, I know we're going to talk Chris Getz plenty, but I know you're working on a lot at FromThe108.com, and I just want to bring this up. At the midpoint of September-ish, White Sox Twitter was about as dead as I've ever seen it. And look, rightfully so. Going back to last year, it was brutal for the fan base. This year, total disappointment, and fans just kind of stopped watching and really caring about following the day-to-day activities. And you tweeted about it. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on how those feelings were kind of taken in as you were experiencing the finale of the 2023 White Sox?
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike and James, thanks for having me on as usual. I love cutting up with you guys. Yeah, I mean, as we're coming down the stretch of the season, you know, I've been a season ticket holder for a lot of bad seasons. I've paid attention to the White Sox for a lot of bad seasons. But this one was unique in the fact that it was such a disappointment from the original expectations. Even people who thought, okay, this team might underperform, no one thought it was going to end up kind of the way it was. And the White Sox really took a battle axe to the roster and stripped away kind of a lot of known guys, named players that people would want to go out to the ballpark and watch at the end of the year. And we were kind of left with like what looked like, a team that's just playing out the string. And you didn't have any stars there to go out and watch. And even the normal people that you would see at the end of a season, just like, yeah, I want to catch my last game or two. They weren't there that much. Even the promotional days, like halfway to St. Patrick's Day, were not as crowded as usual. There was just a general sentiment of White Sox fans that the towel had been thrown in, and they had thrown it in themselves, and the interaction was down. People showing up to the ballpark was down. It was a sad scene in September.
And I just want to elaborate on that because, post-trade deadline, we saw the news of Kenny Williams and Rick Hahn getting dismissed, and there was a moment of jubilation, right? I mean, a lot of people were excited for the future of the Chicago White Sox, and then almost immediately there were rumors that Chris Getz was going to take over. And what's kind of funny, kind of sad about that is tongue-in-cheek, whether it was us, whether it was from the 108, we're saying, oh, don't worry, the next man up is Chris Getz. Well, it turned out to be true, and I think a lot of people saw it coming. However, now I think there's a new direction in which the White Sox are trying to build a championship, and Chris Getz made his hires. Let's begin with the decisions in the front office. Brian Bannister, senior advisor to pitching, Gene Watson, director of player personnel, Josh Barfield, the assistant general manager. What's your feeling about the direction of the Chicago White Sox with those core names now being involved?
It's funny you ask this question because when the news originally came down, we did an emergency podcast from the 108 on our YouTube channel. And I told my Sox Summer that this never happens to me. I'm not much of a crier anymore. I used to be a crybaby when I was a kid, but I'm not, as an adult, I'm not much of a crier. And my eyes welled up with like joy that they had changed the front office direction when initially the firings happened. And my Sox Summer told me on that live stream, he's like, well, it might end up being Chris Getz. Don't get too excited. And then a week later, they hired Chris Getz. And I thought, okay, you know what? This is definitely not what I want. I think most White Sox fans would have liked to see an exhaustive search, would have liked to see some outside name with some success tied to him. But I thought, you know what? This is different, though, than what the last thing was. So I'm going to be agnostic. I'm going to give it an opportunity. I'm going to let this start to play out. And I'll say, sitting here right now, at the end of October, it'll be Halloween tomorrow, I'm cautiously optimistic. And I almost hate to feel that way. I'm happy with White Sox fans if they want to say, you know what, you got to show it to me. I'm not believing anything here. But the hires to start off, it shows me that, at least Chris Getz might be self-aware because his first big hire is Josh Barfield, another farm director, to come in and put his heads together. He realized my farm isn't as good as I'd like it to be. Josh's farm is as good as I'd like the White Sox farm to be. Come in here. Let's exchange ideas. Let's do this. He went out and got a proven commodity in Brian Bannister, someone who has brought along pitching staffs, who has been able to kind of like do the concept that he knows he can tell Jerry Reinsdorf, we won't have to spend a lot on pitching. We'll be able to find some diamonds in the rough there. So I'll say I'm cautiously optimistic that he's at least aware of the way to get this done. I'm not sure if any of it'll work, but so far so good.
Yeah, and the two other big hires, I guess, that were announced right around the same time. I love the Brian Bannister one. The other one, Gene Watson kind of is what it is. I think he's he's one of these old boy scouts, so we'll see, right? Like, I don't really care. Like, I think probably has a relationship with Tony La Russa, like a lot of these guys. But if he acquires good players, nobody's going to care. But right. The Bannister one, I guess like a two-parter for me. What do you think about just like that direction, right? Because like his title's weird, but look, I think he's their like director of pitching across the org. And then do you think they do similar here on the hitting side? Because I feel like within the next couple of weeks here, we should have like a bunch more hires.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that there's going to be a bunch more hires. And I actually said this on the 108 podcast recently. I think this is probably going to be a couple-year process of them going through kind of everyone in the organization and turning over some stuff. I don't think it's just going to be like these next couple months, they make the hires and that's it. I think this is going to be a continuing process. I'm excited by the Brian Bannister hire because I like the approach of having almost a coordinator of pitching, basically, someone who's overseeing it at the highest level. Bannister has had success. I heard one person whose opinion I trust very much is like, it's possible that some of this pitching game has gotten, where Brian Bannister is not cutting edge anymore. But I'm not sure I believe that because hearing a lot of what Bannister has to say, he thinks like an advantage gambler. He thinks like someone who is always looking for an edge. So I really like that approach. I hope they do it on the hitting side. And what's funny, we had Ian Eskridge from White Sox Daily on the 108 podcast last week, and I threw a tinfoil hat theory at him. I said, what about this? They haven't hired this hitting person yet. It's possible that person was still out there as one of the final four teams. Kevin Long was a guy who everyone thought very highly of last year looking for managers. What if you told Kevin Long, look, this manager that we have in there right now, we're not really sold on him. Maybe we bring you in here as the hitting guy. You kind of do the whole hitting program for us. And then guess what? If that manager's seat gets a little hot, Jerry Reinsdorf loves to hire a guy who's already here. So we'll put you in here. We'll put you right next to him, and you can get to know this guy. So I hope they do really shoot for the moon on the hitting side.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Kevin Long would be great. Like, or even like that philosophy, like John Maley is like in AAA with the Cubs. Like, I would take him. Like somebody who preaches walks and homers. I think we're due. We're due for somebody that can get them to maybe do this. So, look, this is really mean, Beef, but I like this manager. I can't. Like, I just, it's just kind of some of the stuff he says.
Yeah.
Do you remember Terry Bevington? I don't know. Like, I'm almost, so I only ask you because I'm 38, and like, I remember like my dad talking about Terry Bevington, but I don't remember like how bad that was. Like, is this close?
What's funny is like, I was thinking about this when you had mentioned this, James. I'm like, I'm 45. I kind of remember him a little bit, but I remember him having more personality. So being more outwardly like that guy's a dumbass. Whereas Grifol has no personality, basically. He doesn't say a whole hell of a lot. And it's like, even the interviews before he was, actually managing the team after he'd been hired, it was like, I know nothing about this guy. I can't even figure out a single thing about him. And then he kind of managed milquetoast like that. I mean, with the exception of he got a red ass about Oscar Colas. Other than that, it just felt like a very milquetoast manager. So he's not as outwardly like quotable and kind of, I don't want to say dumb, but like kind of dumb out in public like Terry Bevington was. But yeah, I mean, the results are kind of following that same line.
Well, and I know like you're very future focused because you want a World Series, right? But you also go to all the games. So you don't want to sit through 60 win seasons, obviously. But like when he says stuff like they're never going to sacrifice a major league win for development, like in a lost season, Like, does he know? Do you think he knows that like that's insane, or just I don't know? Like some of it's just crazy to me.
I think it's just a matter of like not being prepared to handle the side of. Well, I mean, I don't know if he was prepared to handle any of the managing, but not being prepared to handle the side that is a PR side, right? I think what he was trying to say is like, we're going to play hard every game. We're going to try to win every game, and that's fine. But of course, you're going to sacrifice wins for development. A lot of teams, even good teams, will do that in instances when it makes sense to do so. So a team that stinks, of course, should be doing that on the regular. They should be playing guys in an instance where, okay, this is a good spot for them. Let's see if they can thrive in this. Yeah, it's just almost every soundbite that came out of him was either completely milquetoast or just like not reading the room correctly, not understanding it. And I'm kind of like, I'm happy that the original, like Chris Getz's original sound bites were kind of like blind to this as well. The more I hear Josh Barfield talk, the more I think, okay, they kind of get the idea here. I know they keep wanting to throw the term culture out there, but us White Sox fans, that is meaningless to us. Put a good team out there. And with Josh Barfield talking about, hey, we want to improve the defense right away, because this is like, that's music to my ears. It's like, okay, yes, this is a good idea. Go do this. You know we didn't have enough talent. Go out there and get some defense.
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and you're highlighting Josh Barfield, and rightfully so. I got optimistic about the hire, similar to how you feel, right? When you said it earlier about being farm director formerly of the Arizona Diamondbacks, but I feel like they're in the same age. They've kind of taken the same pathway in front office jobs, and in terms of understanding the modern era, I think it's just good to have a couple of like-minded guys working together in that regard. And when it comes to finding consistency, let's shift back to hitting, if you wouldn't mind, because my God, those walk rates, especially near the end of the season, it was really difficult to watch. And I'm thinking back, Todd Steverson, then Frank Menechino, and then Jose Castro, all been dismissed. And, I don't know how much of that plays into the lack of success on the hitting side, but man, they got to walk more. What was your take on just another dismissal of another hitting coach, as well as those walk rates?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the walk rates were abysmal. Actually, I was following it on Twitter, and I was putting it out there for other White Sox fans. Like, it was like a bottom 10, bottom 15 walk amount of walks in a full 162 game season since they started playing that many games. I mean, that's how bad the White Sox were as far as drawing base on balls. Yeah, I mean, you need a change in philosophy, but really what you need is a change in the type of players you're bringing in. Like, there's limited ability to move a walk rate in some direction, right? Unless you get to a player really young and kind of really work with them. If you're getting someone, a college age player or something like that, there's probably limited room you can kind of move that stuff, move the selectiveness and get them to the place where they're going to be walking a lot more. So I think a lot of it is just selecting players that do this and being better at drafting players that you can bring along to sort of do this thing, because we're watching players make nice moves through the Sox minor leagues, but they're all the same type of player, meaning they're athletic, but not shortstop athletic. They are swing lots, so they almost never walk. They have some pop, but not like serious power. Those are the kind of guys that have been moving through the Sox system lately, and they've been doing a good job turning raw athletes into that player, because that's tough to do to begin with. But they're not getting far enough as far as like the patience and being a sort of a productive major league player that has a sustainable walk rate.
We give Mike Shirley, amateur scouting director of the White Sox, a lot of credit for him being forthright about evaluating players and considering character into their decision-making process. And when they decided to draft Colson Montgomery, I think it's a perfect example of somebody who understands the strike zone and is mature enough as a hitter that you believe that he can turn into a professional baseball player with, a consistent approach at the major league level. And we're starting to see some trends in the recent drafts. Like, for example, Michael Turner just finished his first full professional season in high A. He's older at the level, but again, just one example. I want that approach to translate over the next couple of drafts, as well as, these players are continuing to develop. But I want that consistency, because I agree with you. A professional approach is a game changer. And when I'm thinking about the way the White Sox are going about their future, I keep going back to Andrew Vaughn. And you know how I feel about Andrew Vaughn. We've had this conversation before, but we'll be honest, it's been a disappointment in terms of what we had expected from him versus what we've seen. And a lot of it has to do with the swing and miss rate and the lack of walks. What do you believe is the future of Andrew Vaughn? How do you feel about him as a player now that we have a bit of a sample size? And please, we got to be real.
Yeah, no. Well, it's fine. Let me dovetail off your last point regarding Mike Shirley a little bit, because one thing that is encouraging, and Treasy and I have talked about this in 108 Podcast. We've talked about this drunk off our asses. I'm not going to swear on the show because I know it's on the broadcast basement and Chris Lanuti will be mad at me. But we've talked about this with Colson Montgomery and Brian Ramos. They're the type of prospects where I don't care if they have to go down the defensive spectrum, because they will do enough with the bats. They have the patience, they have the power, they have all the things that you need, and you need more of those guys. You need more of those guys where if their perfect position on defense doesn't work, they're still very usable. And like, there's, those two guys are the guys like, okay, we're starting to go in that direction. And it's extremely encouraging. Extremely encouraging to pull those guys in. And yeah, you want them to land up the middle if they can, but if they don't end up the middle, it's not a disaster. They're still very usable and great. We'll get on to the next guy. With regards to Vaughn, I've been thinking about Vaughn a lot lately because Treasy and I have been doing our Trade with Every Team's set of blogs and videos for From the 108. And what's interesting about Vaughn is the discussion about improving the defense. Vaughn, I thought, improved quite a bit on defense at first base in his first year there. I thought watching him throughout the year, he improved a lot. But I just don't think he's ever going to be a guy who is, one of these first base monsters like Christian Walker or someone who's a really good defender. So if I were the White Sox right now, I would be looking at Vaughn and Eloy Jimenez and figure out which one of them I can get the most in trade for. And then the other one would be my permanent DH. And I would go out in the marketplace and either get someone like, let's say, Carlos Santana, who I know is going to walk a little bit and play some defense over at first. Or maybe I'd go out and get a Rhys Hoskins, who maybe the defense isn't there, but I got a 10% walk rate in my back pocket. I would really try to harvest one of those spots to fill a need that the White Sox kind of need at a macro level here. Because I think right now with those two guys, they both don't walk enough for my liking. Eloy doesn't stay healthy. Andrew Vaughn, I think, can be fine if he ends up realizing he's like a 280 hitter and not a 30 home run hitter. But we need to move one of them off that spot and kind of upgrade, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, so Andrew Vaughn has been so disappointing. I thought there was a chance that he was like a first baseman that was going to hit 22 home runs every year. But I thought his OBP would be super high. I thought he'd be like a 370 on base guy, and he's definitely not that. So I'm totally there's one untouchable on the White Sox, and he's in center field. So whatever they decide to do, I think will be fine with all of us as far as who they get rid of, right? They might get a return that we all hate, but I don't think we're going to cry over anybody that they might get rid of. No. So dovetailing off of that, I guess we can do this part first. Tim Anderson, Liam Hendriks, those are probably the two biggest decisions, I would say. What do you think, I guess, just about what they do with those two guys? What should they do?
Yeah, so I'll take Tim first. I did a video on From the 108's YouTube channel where I kind of broke down the season that Tim had just had and comparable seasons of shortstops. And really, when you have a season as bad as he had, it was a -2 WAR season by Baseball Reference WAR. Most guys do not recover from that. Most guys don't come back and become reasonable regulars. They become journeymen, utility players. They're out of baseball soon afterwards, or whatever. So I think you hand him, as much as it pains me because I love Tim Anderson. And Tim Anderson debuted in 2016, the year that we started the 108 blog. So we've been with Tim Anderson since we've been making content. And we're as a group, we love Tim Anderson. I just feel bad about it, but I think you give him $1 million and you tell him to walk. I think it's kind of over there. With regards to Liam Hendriks, Treasy did a video thinking outside the box, maybe that you rework his deal. Maybe you even tell him, here, look, we're going to give you the $15 million over time, but we'd like to re-sign you and kind of have you here. We'll let you rehab for 1 year. The next year you'll still be a White Sox, and then when you're healthy, come back and pitch for us. Just because of the goodwill it could foster. But yeah, I think we're kind of at the end of the road with both of them, probably.
So I mean, I like the idea on Hendriks. I get it, right? Jerry Reinsdorf built in this contract this way so that he could get out of this money and pay $1.25 million or whatever. So that seems pretty obvious, but I do like the idea of just like signing him to a new like big money 2-year deal or whatever, and he could stay here. Cause I think we all like rooting for that guy. Like I want that guy here, but if you're going to lose 90 games potentially, and he's not going to pitch till August, I just like don't see this organization picking up that money. And the Tim Anderson thing, I think this is where we're going to kind of find out a lot about Chris Getz in this new front office, because we know exactly what the previous front office would do. They would pick up the option, spend the entire winter trying to trade Tim Anderson, and then they'd trade him for like a $14 million like bad setup guy or something, you know, and instead of just eating the money in the first place and spending it on something useful. So I think it's going to be pretty telling, that decision and what they decide to do. So budget allocation at this point for this offseason, I've been saying, and we're not going to necessarily get to like the can this team contend question yet. I've been saying I don't see it. I know they play in the AL Central, but they're the 4th worst team in the league this past year. Can they be better? Sure. I don't see contention. So if that's the case, like what do you think for this offseason? Like what are we looking at as far as, you know, just financial allocation and like the type of guys that you might bring in to play on next year's team?
Yeah, it's interesting. I would actually like to see them be aggressive as far as trying to. They're not going to sign at the top of the market. I think that's what you're alluding to, James. Like I don't think they're going to take big shots in the market, but I would like to see them make a lot of transactions, even smaller transactions, because the last regime, that was one of their Achilles heels. They could not shop at the bottom of the market effectively. They couldn't fill in the roster with 1 and 2 win players off the bottom of the market. And the way the free agent market is trending the last several years is the middle class is going away, much like the U.S. The middle class is kind of going away. You've got like this upper class where you have these really expensive, high quality free agents. And then a lot of teams are signing their younger talent to extensions early. So what you end up with is a top level, and then you end up kind of a lower level. You can shop at the bottom. And the White Sox in the last decade plus were pretty terrible at shopping at the bottom. I'd love to see Chris Getz get a lot of reps at shopping at the bottom and see what they can do. And he's brought in the right kind of people to help do this, like especially in the pitching side with Brian Bannister. It's like he's brought in the guy where like, okay, we're going to take a bunch of chances on the pitching side. Let's see what we can get to work out. Let's kind of fish there and see what ends up showing up. And like, I think it's an important skill for him to start realizing almost immediately. So I hope that they are very transactional this offseason.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Something we've talked about a lot on the show, and I like making jokes about Ken Williams when I can, but just that he's on record as saying that, like, why would he sign one $30 million player when he could sign like 6 guys, that like for the same money? So I'd always say, like, why would you sign one guy for $30 million when you can sign six guys that stink, right? For the same, because
right.
they were, whether it's like Kenny or Han or who, like they were so bad at it. Like, yeah. I think every year we'd do the thing where it's like, oh, they didn't sign George Springer, but hey, they signed these 5 guys instead. And it was just like a collective, like 1.5 WAR sometimes, but sometimes not even that much. Right. So yes, that would be a huge change if they could actually like shop at the bottom part of the market. Cause look, there are other teams that don't sign guys at the top end of the market every year that still win. Like it is possible to just, be good at pro scouting and build a team this way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you're not always going to land the guy at the top of the market, even if you're always in on those people. I mean, we saw the Giants this last offseason. They weren't successful. They were trying to get high-end free agents. They didn't end up with anything, really. I mean, it's like sometimes that just happens. Sometimes you're not a fit for those players. And I think that group, like the middle class, is shrinking more and more. So it's going to be harder to sign those types of people in the offseason. Like, bottom feeding is kind of where it's at. You're going to need to get a lot better at it. And like you said, the last group stunk at it. Now, in the 2000s, the Ken Williams GM years, before a lot of people were kind of like buying out older guys or figuring out, they had more hits back then. But I think it's because, the market was less sophisticated. As it tightened up, as people started using data to figure these things out and the White Sox lagged behind, they stunk at it the last 15-ish years. And so I agree. Yeah, they need reps. They need to improve at it.
This is why we love talking to you, Beef. Really good stuff. And make sure you're following From the 108 and their podcast, the 108 Podcast, of course. Look, last season, so 2023, the Charlotte Knights finished 53-96. The Birmingham Barons finished 51-87. it's just been abysmal at the higher levels. Now, in the second half of Birmingham, a little different roster. We're starting to see some of the core guys, in air quotes we could put there, participating in AA. And it's not like Project Birmingham. This is actual promotions going on. And I'm just curious how your group from the 108 and you, of course, individually are feeling about the prospects and who among them you believe can really help turn this White Sox organization into more of a consistent day-to-day competitor.
That's a good question, Mike, because, obviously the two main names for us are Colson and Brian Ramos, but I don't think either of them are ready. So I would take my sweet time with them. I would take my sweet time with the catcher kid from LA, Edgar Carroll. I would wait on him as well. The guys I think that can help this year, I would say as a group, we are low on the second base people. So the Lenin Sosas and the Popeyes and even Romy Gonzalez, who's been here already. I don't know if he's not really a prospect anymore. We're kind of low on them, I'd say, but we're much higher on two arms that seem to be weaving their way through AA and had some setbacks, but got to AAA by the end of the year. And that's your guy, Christian Mena, and then Nick Nastrini. I think both myself and Treasy would love to see those two guys at least get opportunities to win rotation spots to start the year. Because I'm a big, there is no pitching prospects kind of guy. If they're getting outs in AA, let's see what they can do here. Why waste these bullets? So I would like to see them it be open and give them a shot to win. If they're not one of the best ones, that's fine. Send them to AAA. We got time. But those are two guys I think that can make an impact in 2024 and that we might see in Chicago in 2024. I'm pretty excited about both.
Yeah, I like that you brought up Nastrini specifically because I feel like he's just far more advanced than many of the others that they had acquired and also are developing at this point. AAA is just a barren right now. They don't have representative starting arms that can come in and fill innings. And I'm thinking about Michael Kopech's future. What do you feel like Michael Kopech is at this point in his career? Yeah,
That's a great question.
I know.
It's a great question. I'll tell you the way I think about it. If you look at White Sox starts in 2023 and you look at them by game score, Michael Kopech had the top one, and I think he had the third best start as well. So the upside is most certainly there. In a year where, like James mentioned, it's like a pipe dream that they actually compete, I would still go the mode of he's a starting pitcher, and I would take whatever with it that it is. And last year was leading the league in walks, and I would gamble, and I would let Brian Bannister have at him and say, look, this guy's a starting pitcher. We're not messing around with the bullpen. I would either do that, or I'd see if you could find a suitor in trade that still thinks of him as a starting pitcher, and I would reap the rewards. I don't get the idea of putting him in the bullpen. I know he was good in the bullpen in 2021. I don't understand why that's something that makes sense in 2024. And I would be upset if that's the approach they take, unless there's some concern about injury or something about his durability that forces it. Because I don't know. I don't want to stifle the upside, even if it's minimal, even if it's super risky.
I totally agree with you. I hate the Michael Kopech relief pitcher idea. Like we want to take the guy that has all these issues that doesn't throw any strikes and put him in the bullpen. Like it doesn't
Right.
make any sense to me. And like I kind of have always been with the idea of like, look, if there's a couple of teams that still believe, then those are the teams that you trade Michael Kopech to. Otherwise, you let Brian Bannister give him a shot to start in a season that we don't think is going to be very good and try to salvage whatever you have left. So yeah, that I agree. I hope they don't put him in the bullpen because I would be upset. You kind of touched a little bit just on this earlier. What type of offensive shakeup just would you like to see if you had it your way? You don't have to go specific players, but just I guess like the spots they have open. What are some things they could do to just at least make it so we can watch the team play next year?
It's funny you mentioned watchability because I think that's actually important. As someone who watches all the games, and a lot of White Sox fans are passionate and they do watch a lot of the games. Watchability is important. What I would do is I would just go and I would follow through on what Josh Barfield said when he talked to Chuck Garfien that they want to improve the defense. I would spend time trying to improve the defense, kind of in any spot where we had a hole. I mean, shortstop is a huge one. Right field is a huge one if you look by defensive runs saved. I mean, there's 3 or 4 games worth of wins just putting a league average glove in both of those spots. I mean, that's how bad they were on defense. You know, there's some things that are immovable, right? You can't get Andrew Benintendi, or it'd be hard to get Andrew Benintendi out of left field. I'm not a big fan of his defense there, right? Like, Yohan Moncada, you're going to need his defense to rebound a little bit, or at least him to stay healthy enough so that the defense is solid there. Like, but there are spots where you can vastly improve the defense. And what I would do is I would get aggressive. Like, there's a couple of 70 grade gloves. I was poking around Fangraphs or whatever, and I'm not saying the White Sox should go get these guys. But what I'm saying is the White Sox should look for guys that are blocked. Look for guys that, okay, this guy has a terrific glove at whatever position, at shortstop, at second, at right field, or whatever, and the hit tool is questionable. Let's gamble. Let's try it. Let's see if we can get these guys in. And the two guys that came to mind for me, and I actually just used one in one of our trade videos, is Nasim Nunez from the Marlins. And, you know, he's a 70 glove at short. I don't think he can hit. They're going to knock the bat out of his hand but at the majors. But so what? Let's try it. And there's also Corey Howell in San Diego. You know, he was a farmhand in Milwaukee, got traded over to San Diego. Try it. Trade for one of these guys. They're not top 100 prospects. They're just guys. But let's just see the defense improve vastly. If you want to go get Kevin Kiermaier and put him in right field, great. I would love it. Like, Adam Duvall would work too. Like someone that I know can catch the ball. Put them out there and let's just live with whatever warts they have on offense. Because I think this is like the fastest path to us not watching the atrocity that we watched last year.
So those were a couple of the trade targets. What did like Austin Hedges catching? Just like somebody that can catch. Because, you know, kind of like you talked about Christian Mena and Nastrini. And look, I think Eater gets a shot and all these other guys, right? Like you need 10 pitching prospects to like come up with 2.
Right.
Well, they have, I can give you 10 names. Yeah. So, you know, if 2 of those guys are in their rotation.
Yeah, Davis Martin's coming back. They're good
right.
guys.
So,
you know.
So get somebody that can catch that isn't named Salvador Perez. Thanks.
And Beef, we get
What's
it.
funny about Salvador Perez right now is like, he's not a catcher anymore. I'm not as like, I heard you guys talk to Chris Lanuti and he wasn't as cold on the idea as a lot of people are. I'm not either, actually. I was like, yeah, he's expensive. If you get them to eat some money, like you bring him in here and he's like a part-time DH. I don't know. I don't hate it that much, but he's not a catcher. Like he doesn't even catch that much anymore for the Royals. Like they know it's over behind the plate. They're like, he's nominally behind the plate. It's like, you're just behind a DH basically at this point. So I don't know. I like, it doesn't upset me that much, but it's also not useful.
Yeah, he's very expensive. I think it does matter, though, when it comes to clubhouse culture. I think the White Sox need a revamp in that regard. But, hey, it's not my department. I'm not in the clubhouse. I'm not there every day. I just see what I see on the field and that body language on the day-to-day, especially when they're bad. It's hard to watch. With that all being said, we were talking about just trying to improve the roster in 2024. I know you're doing a series. You talked about it briefly from the108.com. Make sure you're listening to their podcast. You're going division by division and trying to see if there's any trade partners with the Chicago White Sox. Can you give me some of your favorites?
Yeah, sure. Actually, I mean, one of the best ones that we did earlier tonight, and it was with the New York Mets. Teresi traded Andrew Benintendi for Starling Marte, on the basis that Andrew Benintendi is kind of like, kind of a steady-ish player. He had a bad year last year, but he's probably not going to dip a lot lower. He won't pop up much higher. Starling Marte was terrible last year, and he's 35 years old, and maybe he's finished, but maybe he's got a couple 3-win seasons left in him in right field. And so, like, that one was interesting because you're taking on volatility. You're just saying, yeah, maybe this is roughly even, and the money's close. You're going to get kind of the guy who's probably a 1.5, 2-win player. We'll take the guy that might be a huge disaster or might bounce back and be really good. And I think the White Sox should embrace volatility at this point, where they're at in the hierarchy of being towards the bottom. Embrace volatility, take some risks, take some chances. And so that one I liked. The other one that I briefly mentioned, Nasim Nunez, who's playing in the AFL right now. He's a Marlins farmhand. 70 glove at short. I traded Peyton Paulette for him. Traded the pitching prospect. Like, look, let's see if we get Ozzie Guillen Light. Let's see if we end up with a playable shortstop. Let's see if we end up with Adam Everett. No bat, but okay, just enough glove to give you a couple wins on defense only. Like, these are the type of shots I would like the White Sox to take. And they start gambling a little bit in the trade markets and in the free agents. I'll be happy even if the results don't come, because that's something I feel like the last regime, especially the last, let's say, 7 to 10 years, didn't gamble enough, didn't take enough chances turning over the roster.
So, Beef, everybody follows you for different reasons. I always get a kick out of like a lot of your pop culture stuff that you just randomly put on Twitter. And you mentioned Varsity Blues the other day.
Yes.
Varsity Blues is like a favorite of mine because I was in like probably 7th grade, and me and a buddy like convinced our parents to buy the tickets to the rated R movie and let us go in by ourselves and watch it. And then we're watching Miss Davis like as 13-year-olds like in a movie theater. It was wonderful. Yeah. So but
the whipped cream bikini, like
yeah.
Oh yeah.
So that's like your poll question the other day. I mean, it's clear. It's clearly Darcy, but it's like 2 questions. It's like I think you date Jules and you have Darcy over like when your parents are gone. That's like, and it's exactly what Jonathan Moxon did.
That's 100% true. It's funny, the responses, because the responses were exactly like that. No matter which one they picked, they were responding like, yes, these are the 2 all 3 goes. Yeah, I mean, I really like Varsity Blues. It's probably not my number 1 football movie. But it's in the top 3 for sure. I would put North Dallas 41st, and then it's tough between Varsity Blues and The Program. I like both of them, but for different reasons. But they both have staying power. Like I watch, like I was watching Varsity Blues on Friday, like you mentioned, James, and I loved it. I loved every minute of it when I was watching it. It's like, like I just seen it again,
Well, like Billy Bob and Lance Harbor are both dead.
I know. Yeah. I knew that. Yeah, it's heartbreaking to think about it.
Who would have thought Paul Walker would die racing cars in real life? It's pretty crazy.
It's improbable.
Mike,
John Voight is such a jerk in the movie. Like he's so hateable.
Worst.
Like he's such a great character.
Yeah, he's,
James.
Bud Somers. Have you seen both of these movies or no?
I got to tell you, I was hoping you didn't ask because no.
My God, come on.
I love it.
I'm totally lost here.
You gotta watch them.
No, I will. It's on the bucket list. Yeah, for sure. Hey, Beef, this has been fantastic. Thanks so much for taking the time as always. You're a treat, and make sure, of course, from the 108.com, you're following everything. We're looking forward to the next 108 tournament. It's always such an engaging time for White Sox Twitter to interact and follow one another and just to embrace the community of loving a team that's just never loved us back outside of maybe 1 or 2 years.
Thanks so much, boys. I appreciate coming on.
That's Beef Loaf, at Mr. Delicious 13 on Twitter, at James Fox 917. I'm at Rankin 906. Make sure you're following FutureSox at FutureSox. Thanks to Chris Lanuti and the Broadcast Basement for hosting us on their platform. And of course, if you're willing and able, please consider supporting us on Patreon. Go to FutureSox.com, click on that Patreon link, and it really helps us out on the day-to-day. For Beef Loaf and James Fox, my name is Mike Rankin. We'll talk to you all next week.